Hello everyone, I'm Apurva and welcome back to my series 100 Days 100 Problems, where I solve your PowerApps challenges and turn them into working solutions. Let's read our today's problem. Basically, the user wants to create an application that looks like the image above. I want to update the quantities associated with each equipment type at each location in a Dataverse table. The table has an ID, locations, equipment type, and quantity. When I patch, I need to subtract records on the left and either add to the records on the right or create new records on the right. I've thought that the best method is to create some temporary collections for each of the filtered galleries, compare them, and then create a patch statement based on what the comparison finds. I'm wondering if anyone can think of a better way to do it. First, let's create a table in Dataverse. The table name would be equipment. First, we will add a column for equipment number. This column will act as a primary column. Then we'll add another column for equipment name. Then another column for quantity of the equipment. And then finally, we'll have a choice column for location. This will be site A, site B, and so on. Lastly, I'm going to add some records in so we have something to show once we connect this table to our PowerApps. Now that we have created the table, let's add the table to our PowerApps. Then I'm going to create a collection so I can load all the data from my table to this collection. Then I'm going to create the same UI that we saw in the screenshot. So let's do that. For that we need header, we need two labels for our from and to location. We also require two drop downs. And then finally we require two vertical galleries. First I'm going to rename the drop down so it's easier to follow when I write the formula. Now for the first gallery, the one on the left side, we'll filter this to show equipments only from the location that is selected in the from drop down. Similarly, for the gallery on the right side, the location will be equal to the value that is in the to drop down. Now let's just add in some labels to display our equipment name, equipment number, and quantity. And I've also added a text input. So this will hold the transfer quantity that we want to move from location to location. And similarly, we'll add these three labels to the other gallery as well. Now here for the first gallery, we also require up and down arrows so we can increase or decrease the quantity. And finally, our UI matches with the one in the screenshot. Our goal is to move the equipment from one location to another. For that, we need to track the quantity, the transfer quantity that we need to send from one location to the other. For that, I'm going to create a new column, transfer quantity, in our collection and set the value to 0. We will now set the value of this text input to this item.transfer quantity. Since we have set the value to be 0, initially all the values are 0. Now I need to implement the functionality in such a way that whenever I click this up arrow, the value of my transfer quantity should increase by 1. For that, I'm using patch function. Here we are going to patch this item.record and here we'll patch the transfer quantity. Now transfer quantity will be whatever the transfer quantity has plus 1. Now let's test it. Now whenever I click the up button, it will increase the transfer quantity by 1. But there is an issue here because my transfer quantity cannot be greater than the current quantity at that location. So for it to not exceed the current quantity, we'll use the min function. Now notice even if I click the up button, it won't go beyond the current quantity. Now we'll add a similar logic to the down button. Here we want the transfer quantity to go down by 1. Now let's test this. Now we also need to make sure that our transfer quantity does not go in negative, which means 0 should be our max value. And for this, we'll use the max function. Now both my arrows are working as expected. Now I want to enhance this functionality, meaning whenever I increase the value, it should also deduct from the current quantity. Now let's modify our formula to include quantity. We'll subtract the transfer quantities logic from this item dot quantity. Now let's test this. As soon as I increase, the current value also decreases. But as you can see, the logic is not currently adding up. This is because every time we click the up arrow, it updates the current quantity of the equipment. So we need to make sure that we capture the actual quantity of the equipment in some variable. Now instead of this item dot quantity, we'll use actual from quantity variable to perform our calculations. Again, now let's test this. Also, to refresh the collection again, I need to keep switching between screens. So for that, I'm going to add a button to make it easier for us. And I'm going to copy paste the formula on the on visible property of the screen to this button. So now when I click on the up button, it is also increasing my transfer quantity as well as decreasing my actual from quantity. Now I need to add a similar logic on the down button. So whenever I click it, it is again increasing my actual from quantity by 1. Now let's test whether both up and down buttons are working correctly. So now everything is working correctly for from location. We need to implement a similar logic to location. So if I increase the value of transfer quantity on the left side, it should get added to the right side. So let's see how we can implement this. Similar to the actual from quantity variable, we'll create another variable called as actual to quantity, and this variable will hold the value of the equipment in the to location. Now we'll patch the quantity in the to location to add its actual quantity plus the transfer quantity. Now let's test our formula. So site A is our from location and site B is our to location. So notice the quantities on the left side and the right side. Now we'll increase the transfer quantity for bulldozer on the left side and it should get added to the right side. Now let's add a similar logic to the down button. Whenever we click the down button on the right side, the transfer quantity should decrease. Let's test it again, this time for forklift. So our formula works and our quantities are increasing and decreasing depending upon the button we click. So far, whatever changes we made, it was to the collection but not to the actual data in the backend. For that, I'm creating a submit button. Before patching the data in the backend, I'm going to create a new collection called transfer, which will collect all the data from both the galleries. Let's make some changes to our transfer quantity and then hit the move button. Let's see what gets collected in our galleries. So in our call transfer collection, we have 0348, which matches with our from gallery. And on the right side, we have 651711, which also matches with our collection. Now, once we have this collection, we are going to patch this collection's data into the backend. Since we have the same names in the collection as well as in the backend, I'm going to use with function for readability. Once the data is saved in the backend, we also need to make sure the transfer quantity is back to 0. So I'm going to use the same formula I used on the on visible property on this button. Now let's test this whether the data is getting saved in the backend. I'm also going to refresh the database just to double check that the data is not getting changed and it is actually saved. Now there are a couple of more enhancements that we'll do. For example, on the left side in the from location, if I've already selected a location, it should not be visible on the right side in the to location. For this, we'll use the filter function. Now we also need to handle for those cases where the equipment is present in the from location but not in the to location. For example, crane is available on the left side but not on the right side. For this, we'll use the lookup function to check whether this particular equipment exists in the to location. If it is not present, then we'll patch it as a new record. And if it is present, then we'll simply update the quantity of that record. Notice that we do not have crane on the right side, but as soon as I click the up button, it gets added. Now we need to add a logic for the down button. For example, in this case, like we have added crane. Now as soon as I click the down button, it will start decreasing the transfer quantity, and once it reaches 0, crane should go away because it was never present in the to location. Now again on the move button, we need to check if the record exists. If it doesn't, we need to patch it to create a new record, or else the same logic that we have currently. Also, I'm including equipment name so that it also gets saved in the backend. As we can see, crane was not initially a part of the list, but it is now added to the site B. Let's test this one more time. Now let's take care of one more thing. If I have hit the max transfer quantity, then my up arrow should not be visible. And similarly, if my transfer quantity is equals to 0, my down arrow should not be visible. So on the visible property, we are going to check if the transfer quantity is greater than the actual quantity and hide it accordingly. And for the down arrow, we are just going to check if our transfer quantity is equals to 0. The reason why we added this is because we have so many complex logic added to the up and down arrow. If we don't add this, it might result into inconsistencies in data. For example, take a look at this. Now here excavator was 11 originally, but because we have added so many logics on the two buttons, it got removed from the list. If the user doesn't have the option to click the button, it will not result in data inconsistencies. Now I'm going to clean the app a bit and we'll see its final look. Here is the final look. I've added a dashboard page so that I can see all the items and their quantities all in one glance. Then we have our transfer page where most of the things are same. Just at the bottom I've added this reset button which will reset all the collection and get the latest inventory data. And that's it. If you like this video, please like, share and subscribe.